Welcome to Gas Station Business 101 podcast. I'm your host, Shabir Hussain, and this is episode number 24.
Welcome to the one and only Gas Station Business 101 podcast, where you can learn all the secrets about how to start and operate a gas station business successfully and make money. This podcast is brought to you by the good folks at GSB Academy Publishing Company. And now, here is your host, Shabir Hussain.
Hello, everybody. Once again, welcome to episode number 24. But before we start, let me first apologize for not producing any episode in last 2 months. It's almost 2 months. And to my defense, I was out of the country for a while. And once we got back, we had some health issues to deal with and whatnot. But thank God, everything is good. We're all okay. So I am back and trying to answer a lot of the emails and trying to produce this podcast. So what I've decided is, while I was on vacation, I received a lot of emails. A couple of them I will answer around the end of the show. And I have decided to dedicate this episode to at least 7 emails that I've received in last, I would say, 3 months, on and off, about the same topic, which is vendor contracts. There are people that have asked me how to deal with some of these contracts, some of the new people that are about to get into this business, and they were given fuel supply agreement to different types of contracts, and they pretty much got scared looking at those 20-30 page contracts, because these are a very complex legal document. And so I've received, I would say, at least 7 emails in the last 3 months, and at least 5 of those that I already replied via email, but the answers were not very detailed. So again, my apology for that. So I've decided to explain the whole vendor contract on an episode. So I decided to dedicate this episode to vendor contracts. And if you look at the title of this episode is How to Negotiate Vendors Contracts to Your Advantage and to Win. Because oftentimes these contracts are given to you by vendors. And of course, the vendors are big companies usually, and they have legal departments, and they have maybe a law firm or few big high-paying attorneys, lawyers that are on retainer or on payroll. So they usually write these contracts to their advantage and not to your advantage. So it is a good idea to read these very carefully before you sign on that dotted line. Because God forbid, if your business doesn't do well and you decide to close it up or sell it or do something, one of these contracts that you have signed previously can come back and haunt you, or even spoil the deal that you're about to make to sell your business. So it is a very good idea to know what you're signing, and in the event you don't do well or you sell or you close your business, if you would end up paying for the remaining duration of the contract. And if that's the case, it can put you to bankruptcy even. So I understand the importance of it. So I spent quite a bit of time analyzing these contracts, and I figured if I explain this type of contracts and how to deal with it, you will not make the mistake that some of the people have made, even I have made when I first started. So it is a good idea to read these and look at it and talk to them and figure out what you're getting into. And I'm going to touch on some of these contracts and what we can expect from vendors when it comes to businesses like gas stations and convenience stores. As I said, Some of these can be very complex, and some of them are quite simple to understand. Some of them can be 20, 30 pages long. Some of them can be just a page long. And again, most of these contracts are usually designed for their benefit and not yours. But as a small business owner, we don't have a legal department. We don't have lawyers on retainer or on payroll. So oftentimes you will see, and I have done that myself, where I have taken a contract to an attorney to have him review the contract. Once he reviewed, he said, you shouldn't sign this because of this clause and that clause and this clause. And we wrote those down and sent it to the vendor and said, can you modify this so I can sign it? So they modified it, but not exactly the way we wanted, and sent it back to us. I took it to my attorney again. He looked at it. He said, well, it wasn't done exactly the way we wanted. So let's make these points again and a little bit differently, but see if they agree to this. So I sent it back again, and they sent me the same document saying, we adjusted whatever we could, but see if you can live with this. Again, I took it to my lawyer. He read it. He said, it's almost there, but again, we need to tweak this part. I send it back again. They send back, say, we're not going to do it. Anyway, long story short, my bill, the attorney fees that I paid for that contract review, I believe was little over $4,500. So as you can see, most of us as a small business owner, we don't have extra $5,000 laying around just to have our contracts reviewed by an attorney. But if we apply some common sense, we can save that money and we can be in business without the fear of some company coming back to us and saying, you did not follow through, so here is a bill and you need to pay this. So let's go through some common sense approach to handling most of these contracts. Now, let's first talk about what type of contracts are there. What I've gathered is we can break down all the contracts in 4 different categories when it comes to gas station convenience stores. Number 1 is something called brand contracts, and these are the hardest one to deal with. Typically, you get these from your fuel supplier or your jobbers and from your soda company like Coke or Pepsi, or cigarette and tobacco companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds and those type of companies. These are quite delicate, I would say, and very long contracts with lots of clause. Number 2 is supply contracts, or I call them the mini contracts, typically given by your janitorial or other service-related companies. And these are usually easier to deal with. I will explain later. Number 3, service contracts, typically given by your phone, internet, or ATM companies, or vacuum and air machine and that sort of things. Number 4, certain product or brand placement contract, given usually by candy companies like Hershey's or Nabisco or similar companies that are usually relates to their brand and the placement of that brand. And again, these are somewhat easier to deal with if you compare that to your number 1 category, which is the brand contract. Now, if you're new to this business, you may wonder, hey, am I going to have contract from every vendor that comes through that door? Not really. Typically, a gas station or a convenience store has roughly about 10 to 20 vendors altogether, from your grocery supply company to your soda, beer, janitorial supplies, paper goods, and cakes, pastries, chips. There are, as I said, roughly about 10 to 20 companies that will supply you with all your merchandising needs and your supply needs. But not every one of them will have you sign something. So don't worry, you don't have to deal with 20 contracts here. You may have to deal with 4, max 5 contracts. And not all of them are going to be long and delicate and nerve-wracking. Let's say 2 out of these 5 or 6 that you have to really pay quite a bit of attention to figure out what you're doing. Typically, you will see contracts that are usually offered by your fuel supply company or your jobber. Then you will see contracts that are offered by your soda company like Coke, Pepsi, and you will see contracts are usually offered by your tobacco and cigarette companies like Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds. And again, these are all brand contracts. So these are the most delicate ones. And then again, you're going to have the other type of contracts, which are easier to deal with. Some of them, you don't have to sign anything. But if you do, it's for your benefit because they will pay you money to have a contract. And I will explain that a little bit later. So again, remember, as I said at first, most of the contracts are designed for their benefit, but not all. See, that's the catch. There are some contracts that benefits you as well, equally maybe, because let's say you carry candies regardless, Hershey's candies. Now, Hershey company can come in and say, if you carry this 5 Hershey's candy around your checkout counter, we'll give you $100 a year or something. Again, you already carry those candies. So if you have room on your checkout counter and you place them there, you sell it, you make your 35% or 40% margin on candy, plus you get that placement fee of $100. So again, it is for their benefit, but again, it is also for your benefit. In my opinion, some of the other contracts do not really benefit you. It's just benefits them, but you still have to have that. If not, you will not be able to compete with other retailers. So there are times we sign a contract, even though we know it's not good for us, but to stay competitive, we sign that contract. I will explain in a bit. But let's first get into number 1, which is brand contract. This is the biggest one, and this is where we will spend most of our time. So first, let's talk about fuel contract. And I know out of that 7 email, 3 of you were about to get into the business and your question was about fuel contract. So I'm sure in my reply, whatever I told you, you read it, and if you had to take it to an attorney, I'm sure you've done it. But for the rest of you, this is what it is. If you're getting into a gas station business, first thing you do is you find a station to buy. Let's say it is a branded station, Chevron, Exxon, Texaco, Mobil, or whichever brand it is. I'm sure it is usually supplied by a jobber. Jobber is the wholesaler for fuel. So what you do is once you make a deal that, hey, I will lease or buy this store, and this store carries certain brand like Exxon, Texaco, Shell, whichever brand it carries, you go and set up a meeting with that jobber. And the first thing that jobber does is he or she hands you a 30-40 page document that is a fuel supply agreement. And if the jobber also owns the station that you're leasing, then they will also give you a lease, a commercial property lease. These are 2 separate documents. And of course, if you're leasing a property, you will have to sign a lease. Just like if you are renting an apartment, you have to sign a lease. Now, the lease is something that you have to sign. So I will not discuss a commercial lease in this episode. Maybe at a later episode in the event, some of you need to have some questions answered about lease, but I will not do so in this episode. So in this episode, let's talk about the fuel agreement. If you look closely in your fuel agreement, supply agreement that is, it usually tells you that the contract is for 10 years. Typically, a fuel supply agreement is for 10 years. But again, if the same company owns the property and leasing you the property, usually remember this, the lease term usually has to be same as your fuel supply agreement. For example, if you have a 10 years fuel supply agreement, your lease should be also for 10 years. because it's the same company giving you both. So if they give you a 3-year property lease and a 10-year fuel supply agreement, then that's a contradiction, because after 3 years, they can say, I'm not going to renew your property lease, so you need to leave. But they also had you sign a 10-year fuel supply agreement. So that is a contradiction. And I believe that if you end up in court, they will lose, because they gave you 2 contracts, but then they let you out of one because your contract expired and you fulfilled your time. So they're letting you out, but they're holding you to the other one. So as I said, that's a contradiction, and usually you will not see that. Instead, what you may see is a 3-year lease with 3-year renewal option. In that event, yes, they will renew the lease as long as you fulfill your obligation. Then they will fulfill their obligation and renew the lease with every 3 years. With, as I said, if they may give you a 3-year term, which is 9 years. Plus, you have an initial 3 years, so it's 12 years. But let's say they are not the property owner. Then the jobber will only hand you a fuel supply agreement. But remember this, taking that supply agreement to an attorney may not help you much, because typically jobbers will not change their fuel supply agreement. It's pretty much set in stone. Unless, again, there are always exceptions, unless you read very carefully and you find some kind of a typographical error or some error that is not supposed to be there and you found it, I'm sure they will change it. But you cannot play with the terms, or there are conditions that you cannot change, typically speaking. And again, I'm sure once I publish this episode, one of you will email me and say you have changed something in your fuel supply agreement. So there are always exceptions. But typically speaking, it is hard to have a jobber change some of the conditions or points that they want to enforce in that fuel supply agreement. So what is a typical fuel supply agreement? I want you to understand this, because this is a very, very important. If you're new to this business, you need to understand this very carefully. A fuel supply agreement typically enforces that you buy all your fuel from that specific jobber and not from anybody else, which is fine, because I'm sure you need a supplier, and if this is the company you're dealing with, you will be buying from them. You will not go to somebody else and say, hey, sell me 10,000 gallons of diesel fuel or something, which they will not, because it's against the law. So you have to buy from your supplier. But that's not where the problem is. Problem starts when the fuel supply agreement tells you you have to buy certain amount or certain quantity every month or every year. So for example, a fuel supply agreement can say the station that you're in sells 50,000 gallons a month. So they expect you to buy anywhere from 35,000 and up, not below 35,000. For example, once you get into the business, you realize that, hey, this store, maybe once it has done 50,000 gallons, but it's not doing that anymore. The business has gone slow, or there are other people opened up new stores. Now you're only doing 30,000 gallons a month. In that event, the 5,000 or the 10,000 that you're falling short every month, they can charge the profit that they're supposed to make by selling you that fuel that you did not buy. They can send you a bill for it. Say, hey, listen, according to the contract, you're supposed to buy 35 or 40,000 gallons a month, but you've been buying 25 or 30,000 gallons a month. So you're falling short by about 10,000 gallons a month. And we typically make a penny or penny and a half or 2 pennies a gallon by selling you this fuel. So you owe us a certain amount of dollars. Let's say at the end of the year, they send you a bill for $2,000 or $3,000 or as high as $10,000. So you need to understand that part. That is one of the most important part, which is the volume restriction in your fuel agreement. And there are going to be other clause or other points that they put in there that it's very hard to change. For example, if you order fuel, you have to give them 48 hours notice before you order so they can deliver that to you. But again, if the weather is bad or the terminal is down, they will not be able to deliver fuel to you on time. So there are times, let's say some storm happened in your area and you're out of fuel for 4 days. When you know there are other retailers that already has fuel and you're not getting yours from your supplier, you can't just take him to court, because you need to read your agreement first. Because if there are clause that says, hey, due to weather situation, we might be delayed, or if the terminal has issue, we will be delayed. For example, let's say you're an Exxon brand and the Exxon terminal has a shutdown, but your next door station or your nearest competitor is a Shell, and their supplier or their terminal is open. So they will be selling fuel and you'll be out of fuel. And there's nothing you can do about that. You cannot go to Shell and say, hey, listen, I'm an Exxon retailer, but please, my supplier is out. Can you give me 10,000 gallons of fuel so I can have some and sell it? It will not happen. But these are not something that happens every day. But I just want you to understand that it can happen. And if you run a business long enough, you will come across situations such as that, where you may have fuel and nobody else does, or vice versa. Read your agreement carefully to understand what and how you can be affected by certain things at certain times. But most importantly, as I said, your minimum volume contract. That's what you need to be looking for when you see a fuel agreement. That is the most important thing. If you're buying a business that you have no idea how much it does, or the seller told you that it has done, it usually typically does 100,000 gallons, but you have not verified it, then you need to be careful. Because once you sign that contract and you walk in and you see it's only doing 50,000 gallons when they said it's doing 100,000 gallons, then that can create a major problem and quite a bit of financial loss for you. Now, if you are into a branded gas station, then we just talked about the volume requirements of a branded gas station. And again, if you're unbranded, the same volume requirement should apply, may apply, and most likely will apply. Just read that fuel agreement. But with branded contract, there is something else that comes along, which is equally important, just like your volume requirements, and this one is image requirements. If you're a branded station, let's say Shell, ExxonMobil, and so on and so forth, they also have a very strong image requirements, meaning you have to have their price sign, the price logo, and all of their logos, and every branded station has quite a bit of requirements as to what kind of a POP, which is promotional material, point of promotion, point of sale material, that are displayed, and they're changed in every 3 months. If you look through your station or any station, a branded station, you will see that they change their, let's say when you're pumping fuel, there are some promotional material that are around the pump or on top of the pump, which is called pump toppers. Let's say they may say get 5 cents off, apply for our credit cards and whatnot. And if you go back 3 months later, you will see a different type of poster or a POP. And that may say enter to in this sweepstake to win a BMW or whatever and whatnot. So there are requirements that you maintain those, along with, let's say, your employees have to be in uniform, they have to do certain things, your restroom has to be cleaned, and your facility has to look clean and presentable, and all the pumps should have window cleaning liquids and squeegees and whatever and whatnot. But the problem is, here is the problem. Also in that contract, it may say that there will be a mystery shopper program that will come every quarter, means every 3 months, and they will inspect your facility, and if you don't score certain number, you will fail. And for example, The problem is if you fail twice in a row, then you may be in default of that contract because you cannot fail twice in a row in a mystery shopper. So these are very important. And if you are in default of that contract, your brand has the right to debrand you. And God forbid, if that happens, your jobber then can cancel your fuel agreement and charge you for the remaining balance. So it can really be bad. So having a branded station is really good because you have most of the good brands have a strong credit card base, which brings you a lot of business. But also you have to be careful that you need to maintain their image, their program, their loyalty program, and whatever program that comes along with a branded fuel agreement. That's why I reinforce what I've said before. Remember, the two important things on a branded fuel contract, one is volume requirements and one is image requirements. Yet you need to understand very clearly that these are the things you cannot change, but you have to comply. Now let's talk about cigarette and tobacco contracts. These are the contracts that are very essential to your survival because typically a convenience store or a gas station sells 25 to 45% of their sales is coming from cigarette and tobacco. So this is very important that you understand these contracts. These are very confusing contracts, in my opinion. The reason is most two big companies, which is Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, both are competing for the same space. Let me first explain how this works. Let's say you have a store that sells Philip Morris product or Marlboro Light Box, for example, more than any other brand of cigarettes. Philip Morris will come to your store and say, listen, we have 50% or 60% market share in this area. So if you have a 6-foot cigarette rack, they will say, we want 60% of that rack for our cigarettes. Equally, next day, R.J. Reynolds will come and say, listen, we have 45% market share in this area, and we want 45 or 50% of your space. First, the percentage that they quote you usually is higher than what it actually is. So if Philip Morris is asking for 60%, rest assured the next company will come in and ask for 50%. So altogether, you only have 100%, but one is asking 60, one is asking 50, it's 110%. So there is a little gap, and that's where I always get in the middle of this, where I'm trying to make both of these people happy, or both of the companies, but I don't have 110% space. Now, the second problem is they say, I want this space starting from the left to the right, because that is number one space, and then going forward that way, that is our space because we're number one. The other company can come in and say, no, the number one space is from this side and on, so we want this side and give them the other side. So that is another problem. And the third problem is some company will say, we want vertical space. Another company can come and say, listen, this vertical thing doesn't work anymore. We're going to do horizontal. So you see, you're going to be getting caught in the middle of these two companies where they're fighting, but they will not be able to talk to each other because they don't. They will tell you what you need to get done, and then you try to convince the other company, say, listen, I talked to Philip Morris, they said this, would you agree to this? They will say, listen, in our contract it clearly says I have to have vertical and this is how it is, and I have to have 50%. So if you cannot do that, I have to set you up on a lower contract, meaning they will not give you enough buy down to sell the cigarettes at a cheaper price. Now, you may ask, what is buy down? Buy down is this. Let's say your wholesaler sells you a carton of cigarettes for $50. And let's say it's a Philip Morris brand. The Philip Morris can come and say, listen, I will give you $10 a carton back as long as you agree to sell this at a lower price. Meaning, let's say if you bought it at $5 a pack, meaning $50 a carton, you should be able to sell it for, let's say, $5.79, $5.89, whichever your profit margin is. But Philip Morris will come and say, listen, since we're giving you $10 a carton, meaning $1 a pack, I want you to knock that price down by $1. And to you, that should make you happy because you're lowering the price, but that difference is not coming out of your pocket. So you're happily doing that because every other retailer is doing it. And the next company comes in and says, listen, I have a cigarette, which is, for example, Pall Mall, and I will give you $12 off per carton, which is $1.20 off per pack, as long as you agree to knock off $1.20 per pack price. And you say that's fine. But the problem is, if you don't agree to their space requirement, they may say, listen, our highest contract is $12 a carton off, buy down. But since you're not giving us the space and you're not complying with the vertical or the horizontal or whatever the case is, we'll only give you $8 off a carton. Immediately, what it does is it makes you not competitive anymore because your next door guy is given $1.20 off per pack when you only can afford to offer them 80 cents off per pack. So there is a delicate balance that you need to draw between these two companies. But remember, first you need to find out which company is more prominent in your area. For example, as I said, in some areas, Philip Morris products sell more than any other product or cigarettes. If that's the case, you need to be at their highest level contract so you can offer the best prices. But also remember that if you ask for them to give you their highest level contract, they may set you up in a contract where your profit margin will only be around 8 to 9%, where we typically used to make 17-18% on cigarettes. But as more and more competitors came in, these cigarette companies figured out that they can manipulate the price in a legal way, not in a illegal way, but a legal way. They suggest and say, listen, if you sell a pack of cigarette at a certain price, we'll give you this much discount. And by doing so, they started telling you what type of margin you should be able to make. And as I said, we used to make 17-18% on cigarettes, and not too long ago, maybe 10-15 years ago. But lately, we've noticed that we're lucky if we can make 11 to 13%. Now, most of these cigarette companies are coming in with programs that you can only make 9 to 10%. And these are their highest level contracts. So if you want to be really competitive, this is where you go. And some of the retailers are already going that direction. But remember this is a two-way sword. 40% of your business inside merchandise sales come from cigarette sales. Then knocking down 3 or 4% profit margin, let's say from 13%, you go down to 9%. Yes, your sale will increase, but not by enough so you can justify losing that 4% profit margin. So be very careful when you get presented with this type of offers to see if ultimately you will get benefit from this by selling it at such a lower price. Because remember, you can always lower your price, but it's very hard to go high. Means, let's say you set your price at $5.50 a pack of any cigarette today. It's very easy to go down to $5.45 the next day, and people will not complain. But if you start going up, let's say from $5.50 to $5.60, you will hear a lot of complaints, and then you go to $5.70. So set your margin where you're comfortable at, because you have to calculate your expenses, your fixed cost. And I'm sure we spoke about this in a previous episode. And I believe I dedicated an episode where I talked about break-even points. So remember to figure out what your break-even point is and understand where your cigarette margin should be. I typically calculate my cigarette price margin is right around 12 to 13%. But if you're working with 9, 10, or 11%, then you know that you need to look very closely at your break-even point and understand, even though you may be selling quite a bit of cigarettes and your sales may be very high, but at the end of the day, you're not making much money. So when this tobacco and the cigarette companies present you with this type of contracts, negotiate with them. Don't go for the highest level contract, because that typically will not benefit you at the end. And it may harm you even, because you may sell quite a bit of cigarettes, not making enough money, but the harm you will do is your competitors will notice that you're selling it at much a lower price, and they will start matching you. And once they do, this becomes the new norm. That means you're all selling it at a lower price. Then you don't have an advantage anymore because everybody else is doing it. So the reason you went to that price is to gain some business. But once everybody else does it, you lose that edge and that advantage. So your sales goes back down to the previous number of cartons you used to sell a week or a month. And only difference is you're making less money. So be very careful about that. Now, the third important part of this brand contract I want to discuss is a contract that's given by your soft drinks company. And again, it's mainly Coca-Cola and Pepsi. Just like your tobacco, which is Philip Morris and R.J. Reynolds, that are fighting for the same space, these two companies, Coca-Cola and Pepsi, are fighting for the same thing. Depending on who's strong in your area, if it's the Coke, then they will tell you that they have to have certain amount of space. Like in our area, Coke comes in and says, listen, our sale is double of what Pepsi is. So we need to have double the space. Means if you dedicate one cooler door for Pepsi, you need to give us 2 doors, which was accepted and that was fine. But recently, in last year and a half, they have gained more market share by different promotions. And they're now coming up and saying, listen, we need almost 3 doors. They say 2 doors and 6 shelves and 5 shelves. So to each door of Pepsi, meaning they're increasing it from 2 to 1. Now they're doing 2.5 to 1. And I'm sure pretty soon they will tell us that it's going to be 3 door to 1 door. And I won't be surprised if one day they say you can't even carry Pepsi if you carry Coke, or vice versa. I don't think that will happen. That may cause a lot of problem for both of the companies. But these two companies can literally drive you crazy, depending on who's the stronger in your market. And every 3 to 4 months, I assure you, they will come and tell you that, hey, our program has changed. Now, you need to give us one more shelf for Monsters or from this or for that or for Coke 20 ounce to get the discount that you were getting before. Typically, this type of contracts are very tricky. And the way it works is if you give them the contract they want, then they give you $1.20, $1.30, or $1.50, something along that line that they give you off per case. But again, don't think they're going to give you that discount in every case you buy from Coca-Cola. Because Coca-Cola not only sells the Coke, the whatever other flavor drinks that they sell, Diet Coke and whatnot, they also sell, or your bottling company also may sell juices and energy drinks and water like Dasani and whatnot. And every one of these category has a different requirements. For example, and again, it may not apply in your area, but to give you an example, if you want to carry Dasani water, let's say it's $22 a case or $20 a case. But if you give them 4 shelves in a cooler, they will sell it to you for $16 a case. And then they will ask you, you need to sell it 2 for $2, means $1 a bottle. And you say, hey, I was making 40% margin. If you ask me to sell it $2 for $2, then my margin goes down. And they will tell you that, hey, not everybody will buy 2 bottles. A lot of people will buy 1 and you will sell it for a higher price, which is $1.59. But if somebody wants to grab 2 bottles, you give them a discount. So my problem is they're trying to dictate how you promote the merchandise. And the promotion that you're doing, they're telling you to do that promotion, but they're not giving you that discount to promote their product. They're selling it to you for the same price, but asking you to take that loss or less profit and promote their product. See, this is what I have a problem with. And a lot of times, I do not agree with all of the promotions that they run, provided that they say, if you agree to give us 3 shelves or 4 shelves for our juice, we'll give you $2 discount or $2 off per case. But then again, they tell you, if you sell 2 for X amount of dollar, let's say in juice, they will say 2 for $3. And as I said, Dasani water, 20 ounce, they may say 2 for 3 or 2 for 2. Whichever it is, they're not giving you any extra allowance to run that promotion. So if you can, negotiate with them. Don't give in and just say, do whatever you need to do, take as much space as you want. Because remember, if you buy a case of water from Sam's Club or from any other wholesaler, a typically non-brand 20-ounce water case, which is 24 to a case, may cost you $7 to $8, and you can sell it at 99 cents, means $1, and make 3 times more money than selling the Dasani water when you buy that for $16, $17 a case and sell it for $25. Your profit margin is only 25-30% versus if you sell other brand of water that you buy from other wholesalers, you can double your money. So you need to look out for your own profit, your own pocket, and your own P&L for that matter, before you look out for their P&L. Now, let's talk about number 2 on that list, which was supply contract. And as I said before, these are much simpler to handle and understand. For example, your grocery company. There are a lot of national grocery companies and there are a lot of regional grocery companies. And they may come and say, listen, if you buy from us, this is our prices. And if you agree, sign this contract so we can sell you the product. But these contracts don't hold you to anything other than a credit application that you buy the product and you pay in certain amount of days later, meaning they may give you 7 days credit, they may give you 2 weeks credits, but you can terminate this contract at any time. They're not going to hold you to a year or 2 years or 6 months or any of that. It's just a contract that says their truck will come and deliver the product to you, and in return you will pay them at a certain terms, meaning 7 days, 14 days, 21 days, whatever it is that you negotiate with them. So these are the contracts, as I said, they're easier to deal with. Again, similarly, a janitorial company who supplies you with your paper needs, your toilet paper, your paper towels and all of that, and your mats and floor mats and whatnot, they may have you sign a contract that says you will carry their mat at a certain price, and if you keep them for a year, they will give you certain discount. So they know that they have a secured service business with you for at least a year. And again, these are easier to deal with and you don't have to spend hours reading through this and negotiating. Simply sign it, be happy, and they will do their job and you will just pay them. Now, number 3 is a service contract. And these, as I said, are often offered by your internet company, to your phone companies, to your trash pickup companies, and your ATM machines, to your vacuum machines. Now, some of these you have to be very careful about. For example, phone. I often have issues with phone service, especially with AT&T. I'm not sure how that happens, but every time we negotiate with them as far as a contract for our phone line, for our fax line and whatnot, business lines typically cost more. So let's say we settled on the internet, phone, and everything else bundled all together for $200 a month. For some reason, in 6 months, we will see the bill going up to $220, $230. Somehow things gets add up to that contract. And if you call, they will say something has changed, so this thing got added. Or they will say, yes, somebody called and one of your employee agreed to add long distance or whatever and whatnot. So be careful and get the lowest minimum possible. Don't get a lot of bells and whistles because they cost more. And when it comes to your local phone company, it may not be AT&T, it may be somebody else. Just monitor their bill and make sure that it is in line with what they told you. But also, another issue that I want to bring up when it comes to a phone contract, a typical phone contract can run for 2 years. And let's say you sell the business within the year and you have one more year remaining on that contract. And the new owner that comes in do not honor that contract that you signed. They can run after you and make you pay for that remaining year. So that is another thing to think about. If you are not sure how long the business you will be in, you may not want to sign that 2-year contract and pay a little bit higher and get a 6-month contract or a year contract. So be very careful and think hard before you sign a phone contract. Similarly, when signing a contract for your trash removal service, make sure you don't sign a 3-year contract. Make sure there are not any clause that says the rate can increase anytime without any notice. If that's the case, you don't need a contract. Because I've had that happen to me, where I signed a 2-year contract, didn't realize that there was a rate increase clause that says the rate can increase anytime. In 6 months, my service went from $120 a month to about $195 a month. And when I contacted them, they said, read your contract. It says, if diesel fuel goes up, we can go up with fuel surcharge, and our rate has increased. Anyway, so after my contract ended, I found a company that didn't have that clause, and I signed a 3-year contract, and I'm still happy because I'm paying the same price. So do shop around and make sure you read the fine prints where if it says the rate can increase without any notice, or if fuel surcharge can be added without any notice. And typically when diesel fuel was very high, a lot of companies charged fuel surcharge. But there is a limit to it. If my contract is for $120 a month, you can maybe do a fuel surcharge for $5, and I will understand that. But if your fuel surcharge goes to $40 or $50 a month, I have a problem. So be careful and read those carefully. Now, number 4, the very last one. As I said, it's the easiest one to deal with. It's called product or brand placement contract. And I gave you an example of Hershey's candy bar. Again, it can be Hershey's, it can be any other company that says, listen, if you just put our display in certain areas of your store, we'll give you so much money. For example, you know, as I told you, Hershey's candy bar. If you know you carry Hershey's candy already and they are good sellers, and if they tell you I'll give you $300 if you just have this 1x1, means 12-inch by 12-inch display at your counter or at next to your coffee or whatever it is, and we'll give you $300 a year, why not? I say why not? If you can make that cash, let them have it. As long as it's placed properly and you know it's generating money, let's do it. Because it's beneficial for them, it's beneficial for you. By not doing anything extra, you're getting $300 a year. Then why not? Similarly, as I said, there are other companies. Depending on your area, there might be a chips company or snack company that can come and say, if you place our rack in certain place, we'll give you so much money. And again, if it makes sense and if you know there is a demand for that product and you know you will sell it, carry it by all means and make that extra money. We almost passed the 50-minute mark here. And since I have lots of email to answer and read at the same time, I will not answer any specific emails today in this episode. As I said, this episode was the answer to few emails that I've received regarding brand and vendor contracts. So I will not be answering any other email in this episode. And as I said, since I was out, I haven't had a chance to catch up with a lot of my emails, which I will do so very soon. And in next episode, I will answer some emails again. And similarly, I will not be recommending a book in this episode as I have not had a chance to read any new books. So, folks, one thing I need to urge you, which is sign up for my newsletter. If you go to my site, gasstationbusiness101.com, and sign up for my newsletter, you will be receiving some emails with some very valuable tools. I'm almost finishing up, and I know I said that a few episodes ago that I was finishing up. Then I had to get busy with other projects, as I said, with some other businesses, and then I had a trip came up that I took. So I was busy, but I'm finishing up some of these tools that I'm about to email you guys so you can use it in your business every day. So make sure to go to gasstationbusiness101.com and sign up for my newsletter. And I promise you, I will not send you any junk or unnecessary email and fill up your inbox. That's a promise. Only if it's important and I think it can help you, I will send you those emails. I will not try to sell you anything. So don't think that by signing up, you're giving your life away. Only important emails, and if I think it will help you, I will send it to you. With that, take care of yourself, and I will be back with a new episode very soon, and that's a promise.
This has been the one and only Gas Station Business 101 podcast with your host, Shabir Hossain. This podcast was brought to you by CSB Academy Publishing Company. Be sure to join us next time as we share with you the secrets about how to start and operate a gas station business successfully and make money.